conversations, and law enforcement. This is Moses' People Speak. Welcome to another episode of Moses' People Speak. I am your host, Terry Watson, the founder of Strategies for Justice. Today, I'm joined by LaToya and Alice Howell, the mother and grandmother of Justus Howell. Justus Howell was a 17-year-old who was shot twice in the back by a police officer in Illinois. And I really want to have a great conversation with these two online today. So Alice and LaToya, thank you both for joining me today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Yes. So let's start with the first thing, and maybe LaToya, I know that you may have told the story multiple times since it's happened, but the case, what happened that day?
Well, I had dropped my son off in Zion and headed to Kenosha, and I had got a call that something was happening with my son and the police. So that day we called around to all the hospitals and the police stations and everything, and because they had said Justus had got shot. My stepson had told me he had gotten shot. And so the hospitals, they weren't letting me know that he was in any of their care. Finally, after 2 or 3 times calling around, my mother was able to contact Victory Hospital in Waukegan, and they said Justus was there. So I called back and I was like, okay, so what's going on? They still wouldn't tell me anything over the phone as I'm traveling from Kenosha back to Waukegan. And I asked my child's father, Justus's dad, Ashley, to go and be my eyes and ears because he was closer. He had worked in Winthrop Harbor at the time. Okay. So as he was going through Zion to the hospital, he finally got let in, and just as soon as he got in there, he was notified that my son was deceased.
Wow.
Now, once I get this news, of course, I'm like completely blown away and shocked, devastated, and all of this. I'm like, couldn't be true, So as I come down there to Victory, I finally get there. They're not letting anybody back by my son. They're not letting any of us see him, but they had an officer with my son at the time he was deceased, which I thought was totally bogus. So at this time, Mom, I think she was back there talking to, who was that, a doctor who informed you that that the Zion cops was back there with Justus, right?
Actually, it was Waukegan police that informed me. They were out in the lobby controlling the crowd because by this time all the family members and family had joined, and friends had joined the hospital. So they had the Waukegan police out in the lobby controlling the crowd. And if I can remember correctly, it was Officer Walter who said that Zion police was back there with the body. And he said, this is like unreal. Normally, the police who's involved with the shootings are not on the case, but in this particular case, they was in the hospital with the body. He said he never seen anything like it. So at the same time, I'm calling Zion Police Department, and they're not getting me through to anyone. They said, well, all the officers and the sergeant are out investigating the case. And that's where it left. They didn't return any phone calls. So by that time, I got a friend of mine, and we went up to the police station where you have the state's attorney, the chief of police, Zion police officer, and Justus's girlfriend. They had her interrogating her, who she had not seen him all that day. So at that time, I feel that they had already gathered their stories and gonna give us a crock of BS. So, and that's what happened. I talked to the chief. The chief said, well, I am so sick to my stomach. And, so I'm thinking he meaning that the officer did something out of their protocol. And that's what I'm feeling. But it all changed. It all changed, and they covered up the shooting, and they lied, and it just went from there. We protested, and we had a trial, that we never got any justice for. The cops lied on stand. No one saw the gun but the officer that shot Justice twice in the back. And the way they had the setting of the shooting, it's like they placed a gun, they placed a cell phone, and just took pictures of it. Nothing showing anything to justify Justice did not have a gun. So it was all
Push that narrative right away.
the
Wow.
narrative
They
was
pushed
a
the
lie.
narrative right away. They said, of course, they said they feared for their life. But the thing about it is, they said that they were responding to gunshots in the neighborhood. They had gotten a call that two boys were, I guess, tussling, and they heard gunshots. And the police said they responded immediately to the scene. And Officer Eric Hill, the one that murdered my son, he sat there and he said that he had feared for his life, and he was also fearing for one of his fellow officers who was chasing Justice, well, who was running in the line of the way Justice was running with this quote unquote gun that he was supposed to have. They said that my son was going to meet a boy to buy a gun. This is all the narrative. And like the shots rang out, and as they pursued Justice to neutralize the threat, they had to shoot my son down in the front yard of somebody's house.
Wow.
Broad daylight.
Now that and by the way, that was captured on video too.
Video surveillance, correct.
Yes.
And that video came out maybe like, I want to say like a month later. Mom, do you remember when the video came out?
The one video came out, it was within a week, but they hashed it up and they called themselves making it so you could see it more vividly. But what I believe happened is that they took that video and they distorted in a way to show what they were saying, but it didn't show as much. It just shows a kid running, look behind him to see how close the police was, and he was shot once, and he went down, and that fatal shot was the second shot that killed him.
Wow. Wow.
Which we found out later in trial that he didn't automatically die there. They jumped on his back and handcuffed him while my son screaming out, and I believe he was pronounced dead at the hospital.
Wow. Wow. And you know, thank you both for sharing that story. And I know that that's something that is really painful, and just I can't even imagine. Now let me take a step back too, because you both sort of dived into this in the way that the incident was portrayed in the media, and even when I first reached out to you, LaToya, I believe it was maybe probably somewhat soon after this incident. The narrative was being developed already,
Yes.
and so I guess in your thoughts, and this is for both of you, in your thoughts, what role did media play in the trial itself?
The media played no part in the trial. They was not there. They did make some reports, but it wasn't in the way of the family size. They had one with one of the newspapers. They said that, well, the jury says Zion Cop was exonerated, that they rejected, jury sided with the Zion police officer, rejecting that claims he used excessive force and doctored the scene in the shooting. Because see, we never got any justice, and we had a trial nearly 3 years later. Yeah, so
also, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mom. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was saying that I believe the media could have played a better role in to push the truth. Instead, they pushed the false narrative, and they automatically dehumanized my son, talking about alcohol levels, marijuana levels in his system, not talking about the big issue that was at hand. First of all, there was the white cop who shot the black kid that was going on like crazy in 2015. From actually 2014 and 15 was the most cases that we had seen in the media. So for them to go ahead and go along and say, oh, another cop feared for his life or chasing this kid down, you know, and then there was a lot of different media outlets who was going around the fact of the big racism thing. And they basically was saying that the cop was doing his job because my son was a threat to society and things like that. They didn't say anything about, you know, how Justus was a high school junior, how he was a good kid. They didn't say anything that, you know, humanized my son, you know, any of the things that he, you know, his art, any of that, you know. So I believe that the media always has a big impact on these things, and I believe that this one was a negative impact. Like my mom said, during the trial, which was 3 years later, they wouldn't let anybody, any camcorders in, basically, to do video. All they had were people quietly sitting in the back, which you couldn't tell if they were a reporter or not. They were writing down these stories in there and then feeding that to the newspapers. You know, not saying anything that on our behalf. They was just talking about on the cop's behalf, how this cop, you know, feared for his life and all of this and all of that. They didn't talk about how my son was running for his life. They didn't talk about how, you know, how that they took a wonderful force out the world, things like of that nature, like they would with the white kid. Hey, he's a track star or a great person in the community, and they didn't do any of that. So I know that played a huge role as to where people thought about it too.
Well, let me ask you too. Tell me about Justus. Who was Justus?
Justus was a great kid. He was my firstborn son. Justus loved art. He loved to dance. He had a little rap group, a little dance group. You know, he loved to draw. He was a very good artist. He loved to sculpt. Justus was a people's person. He was very outgoing, outdoorsman. Justus really loved life. You know, he said he wanted to go to college to become a surgeon, and you know, he wanted to save lives as well as, you know, have a great family life of his own. He used to talk about one day having kids, you know, getting married. He had found a girl he had fell in love with in 2015, told me he was going to marry her. And
yeah,
it was just, he was a great light in this world.
Wow. How about for you? I keep calling you Alice, and I feel like I'm being
Alice
being
is
horribly
fine.
disrespectful. You know, I can see my grandma, Professor Soul, saying, "How you call someone by their first name?" But
Yes, Alice is fine. Justus to me was my first grandson. Justus just had this light about him. You know, he would come in a room just as a smile or joke around, it just lights up the whole room. Everyone that came into contact with Justus loved him. He was also a given person. Just a couple days before he was murdered, there in Zion, Justus always go with his friends. He'll take them to the store and, you know, buy them food, chips or whatever it is. You know, he would go get Chinese food, and he loved crab legs and seafood, you know, and he would
He
bring
bought
his
his friends
friends.
$100-something worth of Chinese food. Like, what are you doing?
Yes. Then he come back the next day, Grandma, give me $20. Boy, you just had $100 yesterday. What is that? And so he had a great sense of humor, and most times I always get caught up into his pranks. He gets me every time. You know, he kept a smile on my face. Justus was my joy as a grandchild, and to see him take down like he was, it was very devastating and heartbreaking, and we could never live the same. You know, that was a life-changing experience to have him. He was also a great brother to his two sisters. Jayla, his sister, is 17 now, and oftentimes she talk about her brother being killed at the age 17, her having to go through the loss of her oldest brother, who was her mentor. You know, he taught her to write music, to sing. He brought her out of her shyness on the microphone and she sings good this day. And she's coming out of that shyness. But all that was because of him. So he touched this world in a way that no one ever know. But maybe his family and his friends, and they loved him.
Jayla actually made.
Wow.
It says
yes.
Yeah, it's got footprints of children that's been murdered by the police in blood, and there's the cop dragging them along with the chain. This is America, she says.
Well, how old was she when she?
She made this, I believe she made this just last year or
Wow.
almost 2 years ago now.
Yes, and it
Wow.
was for a school project.
Yep, it was for school project.
Mm. One thing that I talk about, and maybe I would love to get your point of view, both of you, on this. So I do a lot of training with law enforcement, and I try to give folks an idea of the generational trauma that comes from things like this. When an incident like this happens, it doesn't just impact um, a family; it impacts a whole community.
Yes.
Um, Give me what is your take on that? What is your I mean, as far as something like this happening, if you had to speak to police officers and try to explain to them how this kind of things impact the relationship between black and brown people and law enforcement, what would you say to them?
Um, I would say basically you guys need to abolish that whole blue code of silence because you're sitting there preaching to our communities that we should snitch on one another. You know what I'm saying? Because there's no snitch rule in the community, but at the same time, you also have your no snitch rule within the police community. I would think if they want to go ahead and mend the relationship of the community members and law enforcement, first of all, they need to go ahead and abolish that blue code of silence because you do have your officers out there willing to speak up. But then once they speak up, they're fired. They're, basically they keep on harassing them. They'll get from certain organizations and things like that. And
Mm-hmm.
not only that, I would tell them just tell the truth. Just put the truth out there. Stop saying take away the whole I fear for my life because you're wearing a badge. First of all, you signed up for this job. We can't have cowards trying to enforce laws for one. You know what I mean? Because that's what starts the narratives. The right and the wrong. That's not how you have a one-sided relationship. That's one-sided. It needs to be understood and fair. And at the same time, I think that they abuse their power all the time. All the time you see it in the black and brown communities. These law enforcement, they're abusing their power. They're walking around like they can't be touched. And statistically they can't. So yeah, basically I don't think that it's the training because the training date back to slave days. They know what they're there for. You know what I'm saying? I think basically that the body cameras are bringing to the light a lot of injustices that go on in these departments, but at the same time, they can also cut those off. You know what I mean? It's the mentality of the whole law enforcement. It's not just one officer. That's one thing too. It's the power of the establishment that they have. So that kind of dims the light on everything the community has to offer. And not only that, with the representation that the police have for them, it's almost impossible to win a case against them.
Wow.
So, out here we have very little to none, or we have fair representation. And a lot of times, in our case, in these situations, we don't know who to trust. We don't
Wow.
know who to trust. So law enforcement has a big role in that. A big role in that.
Wow.
And I also think that they are playing judge, juror, and executioner
Mm.
because they're taking lives out here on the street. And it's happening all around the world. It's where we get no justice because they're shooting to kill, then ask questions later. I think every individual should have their day in court, whether they're guilty or not guilty. And most times they say they feared for a life. It could be a cell phone, a bat. You know, I mean, you have to use less force on individual situations. And I'm thinking with all the murders by police around the world, they're not doing anything but shooting to kill and ask questions later. And then when we go to court or to trial, they fear for their lives. How about us fearing for our lives?
Mm.
When they approach us, they have the gun out. What are we supposed to do? Hold our hands up? We killed anyway.
Mm.
We get on our knees, we shot and killed. and it's not fair. And how could we build a relationship with someone when we know that they're out to kill us? It's like we got a tag on our back, for
Wow.
brown and black people. And so how do you build a relationship with a murderer? And I just call it like I see it.
Wow. That is deep.
There's no
Wow.
trust. They don't trust us, so why should we? One of the first things you always was taught when you were younger, trust those. I mean, respect those who, give respect to their where it's due, basically.
Right.
So if you don't respect us as human beings, you're saying that we don't have any human rights, God-given rights. My son was fleeing for his life. You
Mm.
shot him in the back, then produced a narrative to cover up your track. You know what I'm saying? Like, it has to be trust in the communities. If we don't trust you, then there's no way we're gonna mend a relationship with you. So I mean, a
Right.
lot of
And,
people. Go ahead.
and one of the questions is, what justice look like? Justice look like police are being held accountable for these murders of our young black teens and people of color. You are here to serve and protect us, but you're killing us. It's real hard to visualize any justice in these cases. Okay, we go stand on Capitol Hill. We did that 2018. We produce legislations for less force, because police are using excessive force when dealing with people of color. Nothing seems to be working. And they're not above the law, but it seems to me, and to the people who've lost someone to police brutality or police shootings or police murder, that they're above the law, because the system just turned things around where it's in the officer favor. We did have the Laquan McDonald that shows us a little hope, but they're going to give us one out of 1,000, maybe.
Right.
But count how many officers has been held accountable for the murder of a black or brown person. You can count that on one hand. And then before the Laquan McDonald, it was like 50 years before, 100, maybe never.
Wow. And sorry, LaToya, you saying something. I'm sorry.
I was going to also say what justice looks like is just basically getting the truth out there, raising the awareness of the brutal, and just Department of Zion. The Justice was not the first one shot there. He wasn't the last. After they killed my son, they went and killed another boy for taking pictures outside of a school. It shot another man in the chest in the driveway of his own home. Justice would look like getting these officers indicted, fired, and sentenced. And I want them to be removed and never to be able to work again, because oftentimes you see that these officers are forced to take a leave of absence, and then they're in another department. And then once in these other departments, they accumulate more murder, more death, more blood on their hands. So changing them to another department is not justice. Kicking them out and indicting them, that's what justice looks like. Justice also looks like us being portrayed in a positive light in the media, so that the people will know that, yeah, you made a mistake. You made a mistake and you've done wrong. That's what I would look for with justice.
Is it? That's a question that I typically ask anyone who comes on the show. The last episode that I recorded was with Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. Right, his father was shot by a police officer in his home, and they made a movie about it, the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain. And what you're both are saying is very similar to what he said to me on that show as well. So it's something that I hear quite a bit. Wow. So one thing I would ask, my other question to you both again is, when you think about this whole situation from the day that you had that phone call all the way up to today, what kind of outreach did police do to you two? Like, was there any kind of outreach from the Zion Police Department to you two?
I recently read an article after the justification of my son's murder, um, that Nierheim, which was the state's attorney, he goes, "Our hearts go out to the families of Justus Howell." But, so that's one of the things I have read for myself. But as far as verbally, in person, no, they have not reached out to me at all.
And how about you, Alice? Anything from the?
No, not since day one when the chief of police of Zion, who mentioned, oh, this has made him sick to his stomach and he's sorry. That's it. That's all. No more communication from Zion police officer, Officer Eric Hill. Even in the trial, having to see Eric Hill every day for almost 2 weeks, there was nothing. And for him to lie on stand and to continually and to carry on, he showed no remorse, no feelings, like he would do it all over again. And that's what I got from seeing that officer.
Wow. So to follow up to that question, if they would have reached out to you, what would you like to have at least said? What? I guess I'm asking if they reached out to you, for example, is to try to um, at least show some compassion in this case. What would that look like to you?
That would look like them going back, relooking at the whole case scenario and holding that officer accountable for killing my grandson. Anything beyond that is nothing I would want for them.
Mm. How about you?
Yeah, just the compassion would be telling the truth.
All right.
Tell the truth.
All right. Well, I'd like to give you both the last word in regards to my final question, and that is, looking to the future, what would you like to see happen in our country in regards to policing and communities of color?
Indict, convict, send them killer cops to jail. The whole damn system is guilty as hell. That's what I would like to
I
say.
hear you. I hear you.
I agree.
They need to go down. Some people say eye for an eye.
You need to be held accountable.
Taking people's life, then you need to sit your ass in jail. Because you just took a whole life from people who loved him. You know what I'm saying? He deserved to live. And for you guys to get off scot-free, that's no justice in that.
Wow.
There's no justice in that.
One more question, and I'm sorry, this just came to my mind, but what kind of support did you guys get from the community itself?
At first, since we were living in Kenosha, when Justus was younger, we were in Kenosha. He had a lot of friends up there. They had a massive protest out there in Kenosha. That was the first week. And in Zion as well, the community came out in numbers. And since that first year, the numbers have, disintegrated greatly. So as far as after the media pulled that my son was turning to shoot this officer after seeing the tape, it was immediate outrage at the court building. But since that, you just really don't see people coming and standing up. You don't see people behind the cameras. You know what I mean? Like once the camera shut off, they're back in their homes. You know what I'm saying? So the support from Zion, no, we don't get that. We don't get that. We get more support from families affected in different states. Chicago's a big one. But once again, we go and stand in solidarity with them because we're fighting for the same cause. As far as people coming to just stand here for justice, we've had to bring mothers from across the country and family members to stand with us. And the community isn't, they're not really productive up here.
Wow. Okay.
I also believe that it just fades away to the community. A lot of organizations and people in general capitalize off a murder of your child.
Yeah, they made 2 Black Lives Matter chapters after Justus was killed.
With the law enforcement, sheriff's office, various organizations.
Mom, is that your computer staticking like that?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
And so when it fades away with the community, and every year we do a visual protest rally and
Balloon
balloon
release.
release for justice, and we also built a Justus Howell College Scholarship Fund behind it. So every year we give 3 high school students a $500 scholarship. Because of the pandemic this year, we wasn't able to hold an event. It
Right.
would have been the 5th annual Vision for a Brighter Tomorrow. We
Mm.
called it, along with the Justus Howell College Scholarship Fund, uh, um, banquet. And so we wasn't able to do that, but what we did do, we had a virtual rally at balloon release and protest, and we did have a lot of cars show up this year. Everybody stayed in their cars, and we had LaToya and probably others doing social distancing and marching to the police station, and we was there. So that was something we still was able to do. But as far as the community, it fades away. But the family have to relive it every year, every
Mm.
birthday,
Every
every
day.
date that comes every year that your loved one was murdered on. You have to relive that pain all over again. And Justice was shot and killed the Saturday before Easter. And so it's hard, you know. And
Right.
so for Easter to come the following week, and so he was killed on a Saturday. This is the first year, I believe, that we celebrated on a Saturday that was actually April 4th. So it just brought back all those memories, and we relived that, and we still live in it each day. It's a life-changing event that happens when your loved one is murdered by the one that's supposed to serve and protect you.
Right.
So what I would like to see happen uh, in the future, we have to fight and get laws and legislations in place to have the police to use less excessive force. They may have to be retrained on how they train. You're in the training business with them. You know, you don't kill and ask questions later. That's not how it's done. You don't play judge, jury, and executioner. That's not how it's done. People deserve their day in court, you know. And so
They have
hopefully
to
all that
be
will change
scared.
one
That's
day.
what that is. They have to be scared. They don't have to be retrained. They have to be scared that they will be getting indicted. They will serve
Held
life
accountable.
sentences. They need some insurance policies. You know what I'm saying? Because killing somebody, well, not just killing somebody, but it's the aftermath. Like, that's an abrupt thing that happened that you never in a million years would imagine to happen to your loved one. Now you got to rush to get funeral arrangements together. You got to rush to, my son still don't even have a tombstone because the one I want is expensive. Like,
Mm.
you don't think that your son will be killed at 17 years old,
Right.
even though we are statistically dying around in a young age. Teenage black young boys are dying at a young age now.
Yeah.
And to me, the pandemic is the police. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's sad.
Wow.
It's hard for a community to fight for against the officer because so many times they just have so much more power over the communities. So it's
Wow.
like fighting a giant because you're not only going against the officer, you're going against the entire system. And that's why it's not been successful for black and brown communities. We're not successful in winning these cases because of people are, if not blinded by the fact or ignorant to the fact, they're scared to stand up. You
Wow.
got your community leaders that they'll be there for the FaceTime as far as when the cameras are around. But then once the cameras leave, so do they.
Mm.
They're not helping raise money for your son's tombstone. They're not helping raise awareness in other states with you. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
there's obligations that certain community members need to uphold. You know what I'm saying? That they're just not. And to me, we really don't have that many. We
Wow.
really don't.
Well, I know that. Thank you both for taking the time to speak with me today. I know that this is again, I always say no parent should have to bury their child, and this is definitely one of those cases which, when I first came across it, when it first happened, I was really saddened by, and I'm glad that both of you are still standing up for justice and still continuing to fight for your son and your grandson. So
Yeah, we have a saying. We have a chant. We say, "It's I'll never throw in that towel. Justice for Justus Howell." So every year they're gonna see my face all the time. I'm not going nowhere.
amen. Amen.
Later.
Well, thank you very much. Again, guys, this has been another episode of Moses as People Speak. And remember to speak power through truth. Everyone have a good night.